They said the pyramid looked like a tomb rising from the desert, a monument to a man who had lost his mind. They laughed when the Navy SEAL parked his battered truck in the sand and began unloading concrete blocks under a burning sun. They filmed him from a distance and posted it online, mocking the crazy soldier building a doomsday tomb. But the laughter stopped the day his dog started digging, and the truth beneath the sand began to breathe again. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that even the most broken places can hide miracles, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter because they remind us who we really are. His name was Caleb Turner, though most people in town just called him SEAL. He had served 15 years in silence and sandstorms far from home, carrying secrets he would never speak aloud. When he finally returned, he did not come back to applause or parades. He came back to a foreclosure notice and a town that barely remembered the boy he used to be. His father had died during his last deployment. The small farmhouse where he grew up had been sold to cover medical bills. The world had moved on without him, and he felt like a ghost walking through streets that once knew his footsteps. The desert outside town was the only place that felt honest. It did not pretend to understand him. It did not ask questions about nightmares. It simply stretched out, endless and raw, mirroring the silence inside his chest. That was where he found the land. 30 barren acres, abandoned after a failed development project decades ago. People said it was cursed because every attempt to build there had fallen apart. Caleb saw something else. He saw stillness. He saw space to breathe. The pyramid was not a whim. It was a promise he had made to himself during long nights overseas, when explosions shook the horizon and he wondered if he would ever see another sunrise. He had once stumbled upon an old book about ancient architecture, about how pyramids were built to endure centuries of wind and time. They were symbols of resilience, of memory carved into stone. He had decided that if he survived, he would build something that could not be easily shaken. Something that would stand when he felt like collapsing. So he built upward instead of outward. A modern pyramid of glass and reinforced concrete, designed to catch the sun at different angles, flooding the interior with light. It took nearly all his savings. Contractors quit when the design grew complicated. Local suppliers refused to extend credit. People whispered that he was unstable, that war had scrambled his mind. Caleb ignored them. He had learned to endure worse than gossip. The only constant presence beside him was a German shepherd named Atlas. Caleb had found Atlas as a trembling pup near a military base years earlier, abandoned and half-starved. The dog had grown into a powerful, loyal companion with intelligent eyes that seemed to read every shift in Caleb's breathing. Atlas did not care about pyramids or ridicule. He cared about the man who filled his bowl and sat beside him during sleepless nights. By the time the pyramid house stood complete, it dominated the horizon like a geometric mirage. 3 levels, each smaller than the one below, connected by a spiraling staircase in the center. At the very top was a small observatory room where Caleb would sit at night, staring at the stars. He told himself he built it to watch the sky, but deep down he built it to feel small in a universe that had once made him feel too responsible for too much. The town's laughter grew louder once the house was finished. Tourists drove out just to take pictures. Teenagers left beer cans near his property line. Social media posts called it the Pharaoh's Bunker. Caleb pretended not to notice, but each laugh landed like a pebble thrown at a window. He had come home hoping to belong again, and instead he became a spectacle. Financially, he was drowning. Construction overruns had forced him to take out a high-interest loan. Without a steady job, he relied on part-time security work that barely covered payments. There were nights he sat at the kitchen table under the slanted ceiling, staring at stacks of bills, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The pyramid that was meant to symbolize strength began to feel like a monument to pride. Yet every morning, Atlas would nudge his hand and lead him outside for a run across the sand. The desert light would spill over the angled walls, turning them gold. In those moments, Caleb felt a flicker of peace. The structure might be strange, but it was his. It was proof he had survived. One afternoon, months after moving in, Atlas began acting strangely. The dog fixated on a patch of ground about 50 yards from the western base of the pyramid. It was nothing but dry scrub and cracked earth. Atlas pawed at it, whining softly. Caleb assumed it was a buried rodent and called him away. But the next day, Atlas returned to the same spot, digging furiously until sand sprayed in all directions. At first Caleb was irritated. The land was fragile, and he didn't want erosion near the foundation. He walked over, ready to pull Atlas back, when his boot struck something hard beneath the loosened soil. It was not rock. The sound was hollow. Curiosity overcame annoyance. Caleb grabbed a shovel from the truck and began digging where Atlas had started. A few inches down, the blade scraped against weathered wood. He cleared more sand, revealing the edge of a rotting crate reinforced with rusted metal bands. His pulse quickened. The desert was known for old mining operations decades ago. Perhaps this was debris left behind. He pried the lid open with difficulty. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had somehow survived the years, were stacks of documents sealed in plastic and a small metal lockbox. Caleb's breath caught. This was not random trash. It was deliberate, hidden. Atlas sat beside him, panting, tail wagging as if he understood the weight of the moment. Caleb carried the contents inside the pyramid, spreading the papers across his concrete countertop. As he carefully unwrapped them, names and signatures leaped out. Land deeds. Survey maps. Financial records dating back over 30 years. And one familiar surname that made his stomach twist, Whitaker. The Whitakers were one of the wealthiest families in town. They owned half the commercial properties on Main Street and had recently been pushing to develop the desert outskirts into a luxury resort. They had publicly mocked Caleb's pyramid as an eyesore lowering property value. Now their name lay printed on faded documents buried on his land. He opened the metal lockbox using a crowbar. Inside were old photographs of the land before it was abandoned. There were images of heavy equipment, fenced enclosures, and something that looked disturbingly like waste barrels. At the bottom was a typed report detailing illegal dumping of industrial chemicals during a failed mining operation, authorized by a subsidiary linked to the Whitaker estate. The report warned of groundwater contamination and recommended immediate cleanup. Instead of cleanup, the document suggested they had hidden the evidence and allowed the company to dissolve. Caleb felt heat rising in his chest. This land had been labeled cursed, barren, unsuitable for development. No one had mentioned contamination. No one had disclosed anything during his purchase. He had drained his savings to build here, unaware of the potential danger beneath his foundation. For a moment, anger threatened to swallow him. He had seen enough corruption overseas to last a lifetime. He had come home hoping for honesty. Instead, he found deception buried under his own backyard. He spent the next days researching. Old news archives hinted at a mining venture that collapsed abruptly, leaving investors furious. There had been rumors of environmental violations, but nothing was ever proven. Caleb contacted an environmental testing service from the nearest city, paying with money he could barely spare. Samples were taken discreetly. When the results arrived, they confirmed elevated levels of hazardous chemicals in pockets of the soil. Not everywhere, but enough to pose long-term risks if disturbed. The report concluded that remediation would be expensive and that the original responsible party should be held accountable if evidence existed. Evidence. Caleb looked at the crate now stored in his living room. Atlas lay beside it as if guarding treasure. The town still laughed at the pyramid, unaware of the storm gathering beneath their feet. Caleb faced a choice. He could sell quietly, cut his losses, and disappear. Or he could confront the truth and risk becoming an even bigger target. He chose the harder path. Instead of going straight to a lawyer, he attended a town council meeting. He brought copies of the documents and photographs. The room fell silent as he laid them out under fluorescent lights. The Whitaker patriarch sat stiffly in the front row, his expression unreadable. Caleb spoke calmly, not as a soldier issuing commands but as a citizen asking for accountability. He explained the contamination, the buried crate, the lab results. He did not shout. He did not accuse with venom. He simply presented facts. The laughter that once followed his name faded into uneasy whispers. The following weeks were brutal. Lawyers sent letters questioning the authenticity of the documents. Anonymous messages accused Caleb of fabricating evidence for attention. Someone spray-painted "liar" across the base of his pyramid one night. Financial pressure mounted as legal consultations drained his remaining funds. Through it all, Atlas remained at his side. Each evening, Caleb would sit on the sand beside the dog, staring at the horizon painted in orange and violet. He felt exhausted, but not alone. For the first time since returning from war, his fight had a clear purpose. It was not about ego or architecture. It was about truth. Independent investigators eventually verified the documents. The crate's contents matched archived corporate filings from decades earlier. The environmental agency launched a formal inquiry. News outlets picked up the story, shifting the narrative from "eccentric veteran builds pyramid" to "local hero uncovers buried environmental scandal." The Whitaker estate faced lawsuits and public outrage. Under mounting pressure, they agreed to fund a full cleanup of the contaminated areas and establish a community trust for environmental restoration projects. The desert land, once dismissed as cursed, began a slow process of healing. Caleb could have demanded a payout and walked away wealthy. Instead, he negotiated something different. He insisted that part of the trust be used to create a veterans retreat and rehabilitation center on a safe portion of the land. A place where former service members struggling with trauma could find quiet, counseling, and purpose. The Pyramid House would serve as the centerpiece, not a tomb but a lighthouse. Construction crews returned, this time not to mock but to restore. Soil was treated, hazardous pockets removed. Native plants were reintroduced. The desert slowly turned from scarred to hopeful. Veterans began arriving for weekend programs, sitting in circles beneath the angled walls, sharing stories they had never voiced before. Caleb listened more than he spoke. Atlas wandered among them, accepting gentle pats, sensing pain and offering silent comfort. The pyramid, once ridiculed, became a symbol of resilience. School groups visited to learn about environmental responsibility. Tourists came not to laugh but to understand. Caleb found himself standing on the top level one evening, watching the sun dip below a horizon that no longer felt hostile. He realized that the house had fulfilled its purpose in a way he never anticipated. It had drawn out buried truth, just as Atlas had drawn out the crate from the sand. Before this story ends, I want to ask you something heartfelt. If this journey moved you, if it reminded you that light can rise from the most unlikely places, please engage with this video. Like it, share it, and let others know that integrity still matters. And right now, I have a special request. In the comments, write the word resilience if you believe that even broken ground can grow something beautiful. Caleb often thinks back to the day he first stood alone in the desert with nothing but a blueprint and a restless heart. He remembers the laughter echoing across the sand. What he understands now is that ridicule is often fear wearing a mask. The town had laughed because they did not understand. They had mocked because they were uncomfortable with difference. But truth has a way of surfacing, sometimes carried by the paws of a loyal dog who refuses to ignore what lies beneath. Atlas still visits the spot where he first dug, though it has long been cleared and replanted with hardy shrubs. Caleb watches him from the pyramid's shadow, gratitude swelling in his chest. In saving the land, the dog had saved him too. The fight for justice gave Caleb a new mission, one rooted not in destruction but in restoration. At night, when veterans gather around a small fire outside the pyramid, their laughter carries across the desert in a different tone than before. It is not cruel or mocking. It is warm, shared, earned. Caleb sits quietly among them, feeling something he once thought was lost forever. Belonging. The pyramid no longer feels like a tomb. It feels like a promise kept. A reminder that even when the world laughs at your vision, even when you stand alone under a vast and indifferent sky, faith and loyalty can uncover truths powerful enough to change everything. And it all began with a dog who refused to stop digging.